Morning YouTube, ChickenBrad here. I had an opportunity to play in my first over-the-board USCF rated tournament yesterday. Let me first say it was a pretty good turnout. Only 7 of the players showed up. However, 5 of them were new to the club, and it was also their first tournament as well. And it's always good to see new players starting to play chess. Unfortunately, I was kind of hoping some of the stronger local players would turn out for the tournament, because it became pretty apparent immediately that I had a clear advantage in experience as opposed to pretty much everyone else who was playing. And it's always good to test yourself against some of the stronger competition. So my first opponent playing the white pieces was a boy by the name of Cody, and he, I believe, is 10 years old, so a little bit of an experience advantage there, obviously. And when I was originally preparing for this tournament, I mostly was preparing for, obviously, the players stronger than me and more near my skill level, and I assumed, well, you know, if I draw one of the newer players or one of the kids, I'll just, you know, play aggressively like I normally do and run him right off the board. And I was a bit surprised because that didn't actually happen. He played fairly well, took his time, which I wasn't really expecting. I know when I was a new player, I often played impulsively and therefore got bad position right away, which I sometimes still do. However, he did make some fundamental mistakes, which I'll kind of go over. And myself playing the black pieces, well, I'm going to analyze this game. Normally when you see my games, I pretty much just analyze my own side, because there's not really a lot of point in dissecting your opponent's play. However, in this specific game, there's a lot of things that I think if you're a new player yourself, you can learn from. These are a lot of just normal mistakes that new players make, nothing to be ashamed of. We've all done it, and it's kind of something to go over so we can improve. So I'll be analyzing the white side from a more basic point of view. Just talking about things that maybe could be improved on, fundamentals, that sort of thing, basic theory. And for myself, I'll get a little more in depth. And actually, when I was going over this game this morning before doing the video, I made some shocking discoveries, which we'll get to that in the video, but it's almost embarrassing. I practically don't even want to show this video because if I was playing a player near my skill level, I would have lost horribly. Let's just put it that way. So I guess I can attribute that to the migraine I had all afternoon, but other than that, I really have no excuse. So without further ado, let's get started with the game. So we kick the game off with my favorite move, e4. I respond with c5, the Sicilian offense, which of course I play religiously. Here, I'm not sure if my opponent has encountered the Sicilian defense very much, if ever, and the reason I say that is because everyone in the club I have ever played, when I play e4, responds with e5. So this might be fairly new territory for him. And he responds with knight f3, which is the main line. And here I play a6, which I believe is the time and out variation. The name's not important, but of course if you've seen any of my blitz games, I play this a lot recently. And he responds with knight c3. Just going back for a second, I just want to point out, I'm not going to go over a lot of opening theory here because it's not exactly relevant, but the most commonly played move here is d4, and the reason for that is mostly because it frees this bishop up along the diagonal, which can, in some variations, become a problem later. And keep this in mind as the game's going on, because these two pieces actually never get to participate in the game, so this is actually kind of important. Now, playing knight c3 here is not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a reason that d4 is the most commonly played move there. I'm not going to go too in-depth as far as the Sicilian defense goes. There's plenty of great videos on it here on YouTube and elsewhere, but we'll just leave it at that for now. So here, this is actually not something I see very often. I've played this many times, and most of the time here we'll see either the bishop come out or like I said, d4. So knight f3, or I'm sorry, knight c3 is not such a common move. And against a normal opponent, I think I'd have played I'd have played my knight up here, but I decided to play a move which generally comes anyway in the Sicilian defense and kind of is also a waiting move. I just played a6. This maybe not the most accurate thing. It doesn't do anything to control the center. It violates all of our fundamental opening principles. However, I can do that. So because I've played this a lot, and I kind of just wanted to see. I knew we weren't going to go along any theory lines because, like I said, this was new territory for my opponent. So this is kind of a waiting move to see what happens, and it's not a bad move because, like I said, Black wants to play this anyway at some point in most variations, and is going to get a clamp on the queen side one way or another. So I did it now to kind of see which turn the game went. And he played bishop c4, which normally is a fine move. However, in this situation, after having played a6, it's a little bit questionable. And the reason being is, well, one, you'll see what happens soon. But, I mean, the bishop wants to come along this diagonal, sure, and point at the f7 square, which is always good. However, it's got a little ways to go with this pawn blocking it, and although I can't play it right away, d5 can come fairly soon, putting pressure on this bishop and taking the center for Black, and it's not always such a happy piece right there. And furthermore, I can play the move I did play, b5, and immediately gain space on the queen side, as well as kick the bishop to a less desirable square. In this position, we need to think about where we want to move our bishop. Obviously, this square is out because I'll just capture. This square is out because if I advance my pawn, we win that bishop. And so that leaves these last three squares. Obviously, there's not a lot of point in developing the bishop back to where it was, because then we're wasting a lot of time and hindering the king movement. And so that leaves us with two options. And the best option here is pretty clearly to play just bishop to d3. And the reason being is we want to get this bishop into the game as soon as possible. The only other option, bishop d3, blocks it in. So it has to come out somewhere along this diagonal, which is okay, but we want to play this d pawn up. We want to take control of the center. We don't want to be blocking in all our pawns by our pieces. As we see right now, all these three pawns are blocked in, and this is actually going to be a decisive problem in this game for the entire game. So just something to think about for next time. We would have lost a tempo playing it back to playing back to e2. I know it doesn't look so active on this square because it's immediately blocked for this knight, but that's only going to be for a short while. Okay, so continuing right along, I played knight c6, and my opponent here played a move e5, and I'm not really sure what the point of this move was. I'm assuming it's to try and give the bishop some scope along this diagonal, which isn't a bad idea, but once again, we're moving the same piece twice in the opening, and we need to conclude development before we make plans like that. So, on the other hand, this does cramp in the black pieces. I can't bring the knight up here. This pawn push is more difficult. I can't bring the bishop out here, which I'd like it to go, etc. So, it has some bite to it, but if you're a new player, I would recommend trying to avoid moving pieces twice in the opening until you can have studied lines and you know what you're doing. So, anyway, moving right along, I realized that this pawn is both a target and it's going to cramp my own development, so something has to be done about it. I opted to play queen c7. It does develop the queen early, but we now have two attackers on this white pawn and only one defender. Furthermore, there is no good way to defend this pawn, which we'll see very shortly. And I just also want to point out really quick that the queen actually stands really well here on the c7 square. And if you watch a lot of games in the Sicilian defense, high-level games, you will see the queen brought to c7 early in the game in many variations, and it stands well throughout the whole game. And I also know this from a lot of games I've played myself. So this is kind of a dual-purpose move. It attacks the pawn on e5, it develops a piece, and it brings it to an active square. So I'm not sure what the best continuation here for my opponent is. It's probably what was played is the best continuation. So we'll just go ahead with that. Bishop e4, and this is a good move because I can't grab this pawn here on e5. Because if I do, let's just we'll take a look at that really quick. Then after he just wins the rook, and I don't really have. I kind of looked at this. I was looking if there was any kind of counterattack because I can take the knight here with check. But any way you slice it, black's still down in exchange. So that's a fairly certain move. And this move actually, despite these kind of opening mistakes and having moved the bishop 3 times in the opening and the pawn twice, putting white behind in development, this actually brings for an equal game. So a pretty strong move by my opponent. I chose, there's a couple different lines I could have played here. Both are about equally good, but one is to bring the bishop out to a square it would like to be on anyway, and another one is to just go ahead and take the center with d5. And being an aggressive player, I chose b5, d5. And the variation I was looking at here, which is the best choice for, well, overwhelmingly the best choice for white, is to just capture en passant. And after I recapture with the bishop, yes, I have a nice little battery going on. I have 3 developed pieces. But like I said, this is still an equal position here, and a good game can ensue. White can continue by pushing his d4 pawn either to, his d pawn either to d4 or d3, bringing out the bishop, castling, etc. And we'll have just a nice standard game from here. So instead, bishop back to d3 was played, and now we've moved the bishop 4 times in the opening, and black has taken the center. I guess I guess my opponent didn't see to take en passant, something like that, or he thought it would end badly. I don't know. Doesn't matter. However, once again, white's kind of running into some fundamental problems here. So in this position, I had the option to win this pawn here on e5, which is, like I said, hindering my own development. So I went ahead and did that. And now my opponent makes kind of a blunder. Move had good intentions, but it just doesn't work, unfortunately, in this situation because of things we've talked about earlier. He plays queen e2, which puts 2 attackers on the knight, so I have to do something about that. But the problem is this bishop here on d3 now has no safe squares to go to. Its only retreat option was to come back either to its original position on f1 or on d2 or e2, sorry. And now those options aren't available. I can't win the bishop right away, but that's going to happen fairly soon. So from here, I just continued. Actually, I had a couple of different options here, and I chose to play bishop d6, which isn't the best one in retrospect, but it's fine. So I'm not going to go too deeply into that because there's all kinds of lines that can come up, and it doesn't really matter. So my opponent castles, which is fine normally, but the problem is once this knight comes off the board, which is going to happen really soon, there is this discovered attack with 2 strong pieces onto the pawn, which is going to tear open the king position. And in order for that to be dealt with, well, simply h3 needed to be played. It's kind of complicated, but just some things to look at here. So my opponent castles, and I don't really fault him for not seeing this, but already white's a little bit cramped and has some development issues. c4 was played, which wins a piece, because like we said, this bishop has no good squares to go to. So knight takes, bishop takes, and bishop takes on c4. There was some engine lines that I'm not going to go into because, like I said, they're really complicated, and ideas like bishop to f5. So, but I don't think that's something we would have seen out of this game from even if I was playing a much stronger opponent. So, no fault for not finding that. That was definitely high-level type play-ish, but just something to consider for the others that may be looking at this. Bishop takes c4, which is fine. You have to concede the bishop, so you grab a pawn for it. The other option is to let me capture, but this is good. I chose to recapture with the b pawn, and I think that, well, I know for certain that this was a mistake, but after analyzing it now, but at the time I was thinking, after capturing with the d pawn, oops, what's going on here? There we go. I was thinking something like, the bishop comes out here, and then we have this double. Oops. Well, you get the point. This this double kind of these bishops just raking along the king position, and it's going to be a lot of trouble for white. But the problem is I'm not castled yet, and I guess this isn't a big deal. But I just I didn't want all this pressure coming down on my own position. Looking at it now, I suppose this would have been a much better for both tactically, and I guess I'm kind of bumbling here, but we'll look at why for a couple of different reasons. But that would have been better. I chose to take with the b pawn, and the reason was I kind of wanted to just keep this strong closed center here, and just kind of keep a hold on the game, because like I said, I was already up a piece, and I just wanted to play a solid positional game and have a nice win without any wild tactical anything going on. And in this position, of course, I didn't see this until analyzing later, and of course my opponent didn't see this. No shame in that. Like I said, it's kind of a complicated tactic, but knight takes on d4 is actually, or d5, excuse me, is actually possible here. And the reason being, if I recapture with the pawn, then f4 is incredibly strong with exploiting this pin between the king and the queen. So that was overlooked, and this is actually where it starts to get embarrassing. So hold on to your seats. Rook e1 was played, which once again, this h2 square is vulnerable. Normally, picking off a pawn on the end of the board isn't that big of a deal, and I was actually contemplating not taking here, and because I was a little bit behind in development at this point. However, the h2 pawn is a crucial defender of the king, so I went ahead and grabbed it with check. King f1 was played. Just even though it's on kind of an open area, king h1 is a little bit better here, just because you kind of want to keep your king out of the center when the queens are on the board, and I don't really have any convenient ways of attacking this king right away if it's on the h1 square. So something just to note for later. And here I played bishop d6, which gets a double question mark, because this is a serious blunder. And the reason being, once again, anyway, knight takes d5, exclamation mark. And although black is still winning in this position, I now have serious problems. So, not going to look into all the what ifs there, but this is This is incredibly dangerous. Simple tactic, and I didn't see it at all. Even after I had moved, and like I said, this is where it gets embarrassing. Queen g4 was played, and with the idea that the queen grabs here and then picks off the rook, and forcing my king to stay in an unprotected position. It's kind of a noble idea. But it's not going to work. These kind of tricks don't really work specifically against stronger players. And the thing about them is if they don't work, once again you're moving the queen twice, and we're kind of still in an opening state because we still have undeveloped pieces here. Best move here is to play d3 and get this bishop into the game before we attempt anything like this. And here I played another serious blunder. I played f5. And why is this a blunder? Once again, queen takes f5. Hi. What am I what am I thinking here? Oh boy. Anyway, so hanging pawns out to dry left and right, and so looking at my own position here, yes, I'm just from a perspective of it, if I was playing this against a stronger opponent, I'm having major problems here. I should not necessarily be losing right away, but my position should be have a lot of pressure on it. F5 pawns hanging, D5 pawns hanging. Pin on my king. I can't castle right away, so queen takes F5. And how does my king get to safety? This is very difficult. And I have to kind of go back and look at for this. I played aggressively to try and pick up some material in the opening. However, I neglected my kingside development. Obviously, queenside castling is not much better because there's no protection there. Better, perhaps, would have been to maybe just pass on a little bit of that aggression, specifically maybe on taking the h2 pawn, and just get my king safe here, especially once the queen gets out. So, in retrospect, mistakes I made. After f5, queen d4 was played, and here, once again, I am still oblivious to this pin going on. Embarrassing. Let's just leave it at that. So I opted for the move knight takes f6. I was considering, even though I didn't, I guess I kind of sensed something was off here. I was considering the move king f7 actually, which could have ended absolutely terribly. Good thing I didn't play this move. I'm sure this wouldn't have happened in the game, but you want to assume your opponent is going to make the best response that you can find, and you don't want to rely on your opponent making mistakes unless it's your last chance to win or something like that. So this is what might have happened if I would have played king 7. Knight takes on d5, and if I try to recapture the knight, queen takes d5 check. Best move here is king g6, and then there goes my rook. So my advantage that I had picked up in the opening has completely disappeared, and the only thing keeping me alive at this point is the fact that these pieces can't quickly get into the game. If they could, I'd just be totally losing here. So thankfully I didn't choose that defense. I did play knight f6, which yes, it develops a piece, that's good, and prepares to castle if I get that luxury. However, this is still not defending the d5 square because 2 attackers, 1 defender. Hello. So, do I need to go into what happens if that pawn is taken? Probably no point. So, let's just back up a second. My opponent didn't see this. No shame in that. We all miss things. And, it is kind of a complicated tactic. I missed it myself, which is embarrassing, but moving along. So let's pretend like that doesn't exist for a second. Fundamentally, what needs to be played here. Once again, I can't stress enough, these two pieces are not involved in the game. D3. It has to be played. There's... I mean, it's not great, but you have to get these pieces involved. There's no way around it, because, well, you know, if you wait too long, it might be too late, and that's what ends up happening. So from here, my opponent makes a blunder, and this is actually probably the only time I think he made a move quickly. So the move that was played here was rook takes e6, and I guess the only thing we can really say about that is if something looks too good to be true, it probably is, so you might want to check it twice. Can't say I've never done this because I've probably done it 1,000 times, but when you have 60 minutes, use your time. That's all I can recommend. I did the same thing quite a bit especially when I was younger. So bishop takes e6, and unfortunately for white, any problems I had in this position are now solved because there is no longer a pin on the king. I can castle and this pawn is no longer hanging. So my opponent plays queen e3, reintroducing the pin, which is okay, but we've had, I can't count how many queen moves, and we've had no bishop moves, no knight moves. D3, it has to be played. Don't know what else to say. So, from here, played knight e4. Finally, a move earlier, I recognized this pin that was going on, so I played knight e4 to block this with noble ideas that if d3 was played here, I could play bishop c5 with pressure on this square in front of the king, with some interesting ideas here, perhaps here, things like that. Tactically, that's actually not working, but it wasn't a huge risk. So this move is fine. My opponent plays knight takes, which is perfectly alright. I recaptured with the f-pawn. The computer tells me that recapturing with the d-pawn was slightly more accurate, but I kind of wanted to I didn't want to have this isolated pawn here, and I knew castling was coming, and I wanted to have this nice open file here to bear down on the king and hopefully finish this game up. Not sure why capturing the d-pawn is more accurate, but that's what the engine says. Not important. Queen g5 was played, and once again, d3 has to be played. So here we are with this move. I'm not even sure what the point of this move was. Nothing's really being threatened. Maybe a little bit of frustration, just something like that. But in any event, black castles, and now there are no weaknesses at all in the black position. So from here, my opponent plays b3, which finally gets these pieces on the back rank activated, with ideas probably of bringing the bishop out and bearing down on the king position, which is a good idea. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too late, and the white doesn't have two tempi, excuse me, to get his pieces activated. This needed to be done earlier in the game. No point in dwelling on the past, but something to think about for next time. So let's just get rid of that color commentary for a second, and from here, my spider sense started tingling when I was playing, and I still had about 40 minutes on my clock, so I kind of stepped back away from the board a little bit, and I found a pretty crushing combination. So if you want to pause the video and take a look, see what you can find, now would be the time to do so. So from here, the winning move is king takes f2 check. And unfortunately, after this move, a couple of my favorite words to mutter in chess become apparent, and that is, there is no defense. At the time, I didn't really bother to analyze any of the variations if the white king opts not to take the rook. Let's say something like king e1's played after simply rook a to f8. It doesn't take rocket surgery to see that white is having serious problems here. So, just going back to the game, and this is actually from the move beforehand. This was a mate in 7 position. I didn't figure it out all the way out exactly, but it's yeah. Anyway, so we'll just go through a couple variations of the tries that white has. So white's best choice obviously is to capture. King takes f2, and after rook f8 check, with the idea that that rook sacrifice to open up the king position. There's no good option for white. Computer gives the best move to sacrifice the queen here, actually, but that's just kind of irrelevant. So we'll just take a look at what can happen. This square obviously is covered by the pawn and the rook. These two squares covered by the rook here, and this square is covered by the bishop. So that leaves 4 choices for the black king. So the first option we'll look at here is king to e1, and from here bishop g3 check. If the king tries to go to d1, then rook f1 check. King e2 is the only legal move, and rook e1 mate, so that's not possible. Going back, the king can come down here to e2. Sorry, this program's kind of odd sometimes. From here, rook f2 check, and once again, if he plays back to d1, it's simply mate. So otherwise, the king can go to e3, and from here, queen c5, queen b6 doesn't matter. The only legal move is to play pawn to d4, and after c takes d en passant, it's checkmate. So that leaves the third option of king e1. And I hate this computer. King e1. From here, rook takes g2 check, and there's a couple of different tries that white has. Obviously, if he plays back here, we come in with the same mate we've seen a couple times. If he comes down here, well, he can't come there, so the only other option is to come here back to the f1 square, and queen f7 checks, go ahead, sacrificing the other rook. Best move here is to take, king takes g2, and then queen f2 check. The only legal move is king to h1, and then queen h2 mate. So those options are not possible. The last, let's see, the other choice, just going back a minute, here, the king goes to e2. From here, queen f7, and there's not really anything to, like I said, the queen can come in and block the scope of this queen here, but there's no stopping it. Let's just say bishop b2 to kind of clear this back rank so the rook can protect it, and not really any help. Queen f2 check, only legal move is king to d1, and queen f1 mate. White's third option here is to play to the e3 square, and white can play queen c5 check. There's 2 possible options. The first is if the king comes back to e2, and it's fairly simply queen f2 check. The only legal move is king d1, and then queen f1 mate. So that's not possible. The last option is d4, and once again, c takes d en passant. Only legal move is king to d2. Queen takes c2 check. There's 2 possible options here. The first, king e1, leads to queen e2 mate. The second one, king e3. There's either queen f2 mate or bishop c5 mate. So that is not possible. And the last option, which was played in the game, king g1, and here very simply bishop h2 check, king h1 is the only move, and rook f1 checkmate. So that's going to conclude the analysis of my first USCF rated tournament game. Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks to my opponent for a game well played, and I wish him luck in the rest of his games, and the rest of you in your games as well. ChickenBrad signing off.